Okay, I want to try a little experiment with you, just for a
Yeah.
second. Close your eyes. I want you to conjure up a very specific image.
Okay, I'm with you.
It's a rooster, but not just, a barnyard rooster. It's a cartoon rooster.
I think I know where you're going with this.
He's wearing a little green tunic. He's strolling through this beautiful watercolor forest, and he's strumming a lute.
Yep.
Now, in your head, whistle that tune. You know the one I'm talking about.
Whistle stop. The intro to Robin Hood.
Exactly. For millions and millions of people, that little sound,
Yeah.
that's the sonic wallpaper of their childhood.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
It's comfort. It's innocence. It's a rainy Saturday afternoon watching Disney.
Right. So I want you to take that image, that innocent little rooster, squunch it up in your mind, and just throw it away.
Okay. Gone.
Now replace it with this. A guy standing on a massive Broadway stage. He's in a full tuxedo, and he's holding a heavy Golden Tony Award
The highest honor in theater.
for writing a musical score that the New York literary critics are calling a masterpiece of American adaptation, a work of genius.
A huge leap from a cartoon rooster.
A huge leap. And then, just to make it really complicated, wipe that image away too.
Okay, where are we going now?
Replace it with this. A guy in a grimy, cheap Nashville motel room. The ashtray's overflowing. He's popping amphetamines just to stay awake, maybe to stay sane. He's shaking.
The wild child.
And he's writing lyrics on a napkin that sound like absolute inspired gibberish. Dwackadoo.
Chugala.
The problem is you can't actually wipe any of those images away because they're all the same person.
They are all Roger Miller.
Today, on this deep dive, we are trying to figure out how one person can be all of those things. How does Roger Miller even exist?
He's arguably the most complex and maybe misunderstood figure in the entire history of country music. And that's saying something.
And I don't use a word like complex lightly. Usually with artists, we have these neat little boxes we can put them in.
Right, you've got the tortured genius box. Or the novelty act clown box.
Or the serious, earnest songwriter. Roger Miller was somehow all three of those, all at the same time, sometimes in the same song.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who literally started out picking cotton in the depths of the Great Depression.
Dirt poor, an 8th grade education.
And he ends up winning 11 Grammys. Not over a lifetime, 11 Grammys in 2 years.
It's an insane number. And that's really the paradox we need to try and solve today. Because on the surface, if you ask the average person, Roger Miller is the king of the road guy.
Or the dang me guy. He's remembered for being funny, for being quirky, for the nonsense syllables.
But then you talk to musicologists, or you talk to the people who are actually in the room with him, people like Willie Nelson or Chris Christopherson.
Yeah.
They don't talk about him like he was a comedian.
No, not at all. They talk about him like he was a Mozart-level savant who just happened to be born in rural Oklahoma and played a guitar.
But that level of genius, it usually comes with a price tag. And in Roger Miller's case, the receipt was very, very long.
Extremely long. This is really a story about the cost of creativity. It's about how that wild child attitude, that chaotic energy can fuel a legendary career.
But at the same time, it can burn a life right down to the ground.
It really can.
So let's get into it. Our source material today is primarily the Roger Miller Wikipedia archives, looking at his biography, his discography, all the accolades. And to understand him, we have to start way, way back.
Right at the beginning.
And I think with a lot of these country legends, it's easy to gloss over the humble beginnings part. We just say, oh, he was poor, and we move on to the hits.
It's sort of a trope, isn't it? The log cabin narrative.
But with Miller, the poverty and, more importantly, the tragedy, it seems absolutely structural to who he became as an artist.
Oh, 100%. You cannot understand the humor if you don't first understand the trauma. I think that's the whole thesis here.
So let's set the scene. Roger Dean Miller, born January 2nd, 1936 in Fort Worth, Texas. But his life, as he knew it, essentially ended and had to restart when he was just 1 year old.
Yeah, this is the first and maybe the biggest tragedy. His mother, Jean, she contracted spinal meningitis.
And she died.
She died when Roger was, for all intents and purposes, still an infant. He would have no memory of her.
Now, you have to zoom out for a second and think about the context. This is 1937. This is the absolute height of the Great Depression.
This isn't just money is tight. This is people are genuinely starving. There is no social safety net.
So his father, Laudine, is suddenly a widower with 3 young boys.
And he literally cannot feed them. It's an impossible, horrifying moral calculation that I don't think any of us can really imagine. To save your children, you have to give them away.
The family is just dismantled.
Completely. The brothers are all split up, sent to different relatives, and Roger, the youngest, is sent to live on a farm in Eric, Oklahoma, with his aunt and uncle Armelia and Elmer Miller.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. Eric, Oklahoma. I looked this place up on a map.
It's out there.
It's on the far, far western edge of the state. It's flat, it's dry, it's windy. And in the 1930s, this was the heart of the Dust Bowl.
This was desolation. When Miller described himself later in life as dirt poor, he was not using a figure of speech. He wasn't exaggerating for effect.
He was picking cotton.
He was picking cotton. He was plowing fields behind a mule. We are not talking about a tractor here. This is practically 19th century manual labor happening in the middle of the 20th century.
And the isolation must have been profound. I read a detail that their farm didn't have a telephone until 1951.
Just think about that for a second. 1951, in the cities, you have the dawn of television. You have the atomic age. You have this whole modern world humming along.
And in Eric, Oklahoma, Roger Miller is living in a kind of silence that we can't even comprehend today. There's no internet, no TV, not even a phone. If you wanted entertainment, you had to make it yourself.
Which absolutely explains the introspection.
It has to. All the biographies describe him as this intensely introverted child. He was the kid walking 3 miles to the one-room schoolhouse, just staring up at the telephone wires, making up songs in his head because there was literally nothing else to interact with.
His entire world was internal.
There's one detail from the research that I found really, really haunting. It's supposedly one of the first lyrics he ever wrote as a little kid.
I know the one you're talking about.
There's a picture on the wall. It's the dearest of them all, Mother.
It just creates a lump in your throat, doesn't it? It's so sad.
It does. But it sets up a psychological profile, doesn't it? He's spending his childhood worshiping a ghost.
Right. He's writing an ode to a woman he has no memory of, a woman who left him. Involuntarily, of course, but from a child's perspective, she's just gone.
A psychologist would have an absolute field day with this.
Yeah.
You have this massive void in his life, the absent mother, the absent father, the absent brothers, and you have this kid trying to fill that void with words, with creativity, with rhymes.
It's almost like he was trying to sing himself into existence because the world around him was just so empty and quiet.
But he did have one lifeline to the outside world.
The radio.
The radio, the great connector for every rural kid in the American South.
He could pick up the Grand Ole Opry on WSM out of Nashville. He listened to the Light Crust Doughboys, a famous Western swing band from Fort Worth. But he had something else, something most kids didn't have.
A family connection.
A direct family connection into the entertainment business. His cousin's husband was a man named Sheb Wooley.
Now, Sheb Wooley, for our younger listeners, that name might not ring a bell, but in his day, he was a star.
Oh, he was a big deal. He wrote and sang the novelty hit The Purple People Eater.
Right.
And he was an actor. He was in the classic Western High Noon. He was a known quantity.
So for young Roger, this dream of being a songwriter wasn't just a fantasy. He could look at his cousin's husband, Sheb, and see a tangible path out of those cotton fields.
Sheb was the proof of concept. And he was encouraging. He taught Roger his first few guitar chords. He even bought him a fiddle. He showed Roger that you could be a goofy, funny guy and still make a real living in music.
But that ambition, especially when you're young and poor,
Yeah.
it can make you do some stupid things. We have to talk about the stolen guitar incident.
Yeah.
Because I think it's usually framed as, oh, he was a young rebel.
Yeah.
But when I look at it, I just see pure desperation.
I completely agree. It's not rebellion, it's hunger. He was 17 years old, and he wanted to write songs so badly it was like a physical ache. But he didn't have an instrument.
So he stole a guitar. He just selected it.
Just took it.
Yeah.
But then, and I think this is the key to his entire character for the rest of his life, the guilt ate him alive. Instantly.
He didn't pawn it. He didn't try to sell it.
He didn't run away. He walked to the police station the very next day and turned himself in.
Which is just fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
He has the impulsive recklessness of a criminal, but the crippling conscience of a choir boy.
And that duality, that push and pull between the wild child and the good boy, it follows him forever.
But the law in 1950s Oklahoma wasn't exactly interested in psychological nuance.
Not at all. He was facing real jail time for theft. So they gave him the classic small-town ultimatum of that era. You can go to jail or you can go join the army.
So he chose the Army.
He did, and he later called it his education. He had this great quote, "My education was Korea, Clash of '52."
But he never actually went to Korea, did he?
No, not to the front lines. He was stationed mostly in the U.S. and Atlanta and South Carolina, but the education he was talking about was the rigid hierarchy of the military.
Right, he was a born free spirit, a wild child even back then, and suddenly he's in this world where he's being told when to wake up, how to make his bed, how to shine his shoes. He hated it.
But ironically, the Army gave him the structure and the connections to actually become a professional musician.
This is where he meets the Circle of Wranglers.
Exactly. He's stationed in Atlanta, he's got his fiddle, and he starts playing in the Special Services Band, a country group for the troops. And the guy who started that band was a big star named Farron Young.
Farron Young is a massive name in country music at the time.
Huge. Then later, when he's stationed in South Carolina, he meets a surgeon whose brother happens to be Jethro Burns of the legendary musical comedy duo Homer and Jethro.
So he's rubbing shoulders with the industry.
These are heavy hitters. And that sergeant, Jethro's brother, heard him play and basically told him point blank, "You have too much raw talent for this. As soon as you get out, go to Nashville."
So he gets out of the Army, he has his orders, go to Nashville.
But I want to pause here for a second because I think people have a really romanticized view of Nashville in the 1950s. They picture everyone sitting around a campfire, strumming guitars, and being friends.
And it was nothing like that. By the late 50s, Nashville was a factory, it was an industry town, and it was dominated by a very specific sound.
The Nashville sound. Can you explain that for us? Sure. The Nashville sound was all about polish. It was a deliberate move, led by producers like Chet Atkins and Owen Bradley, to make country music more palatable to mainstream pop audiences.
So less twang.
A lot less twang. They were actively removing the fiddles and the steel guitars, the things that sounded hick, and replacing them with smooth backing vocals, the oohs and ahs and lush string sections. They wanted to sell records to people in New York and L.A. They wanted smooth.
And into this world of smooth, here comes Roger Miller.
Who is the absolute opposite of smooth. He's frantic, he's twitchy, he's unapologetically rural, he's weird. He shows up in Nashville with nothing. No money, no connections really, no guitar.
And somehow he manages to get an audition with the chief architect of the Nashville sound himself, Chet Atkins.
It's the meeting of the unstoppable force and the immovable object. Miller walks into Chet Atkins' office at RCA Records, has to borrow a guitar from Chet because he doesn't own one.
Which is already not a great start.
Not a great look. And he completely chokes. He just freezes up.
I bet it was it. What do the sources say?
Catastrophic. The story is that he was so nervous, his hands and his voice just went in two different directions. He was playing the guitar in one key and singing in a completely different key at the same time.
That makes my skin crawl. Just imagining it. The dissonance.
And Chet Atkins, who was a legendary perfectionist and a guitar virtuoso, he wasn't impressed. He basically patted him on the head and said, "Come back when you've had some more experience, kid."
So that's a dead end. The main gate is closed. What does he do?
He hustles. He becomes the singing bellhop. He gets a job carrying bags at the Andrew Jackson Hotel downtown.
A famous spot where all the music people stayed.
Exactly. And this becomes his strategy. He's carrying luggage, but every time he gets a captive audience in the elevator, a producer, a songwriter, an A&R man, he starts singing his original songs.
It's relentless, isn't it? You have to admire the drive.
It had to be. He had no other choice.
Yeah.
But eventually, it was the fiddle that saved him. Minnie Pearl, who was absolute royalty at the Grand Ole Opry, needed a fiddle player for her band. Roger got the gig.
And that gets him in the door. That gets him backstage.
Correct. And that opens up the songwriting rooms. Through Minnie Pearl, he meets George Jones. He gets a real audition at Starday Records. And suddenly, people in town start to realize, okay, this kid is a weird singer, but man, can he write a song?
But even then, it wasn't a straight line to success. I was so surprised to read about the fireman chapter of his life.
This is my favorite detour in his whole story. It's so telling.
So he's writing songs with George Jones, a future legend. Things are starting to happen. But he's still broke.
Totally broke. By this point, he has a wife, Barbara, and a new baby to support. The royalty checks are just trickling in. They're not coming fast enough. So he panics. He has a crisis of confidence and quits the music business entirely.
He just leaves in Nashville.
He packs up and moves his family to Amarillo, Texas, and joins the fire department.
I cannot, for the life of me, picture Roger Miller, the scat-singing wild man, sliding down a pole and putting out fires.
Well, neither could the Amarillo Fire Department, it turns out. He told a great story about it later. He claimed he only saw 2 fires the entire time he was on the job.
Only two?
One was a small fire in a chicken coop, and the other one, he slept through the alarm.
He slept through a fire alarm at the fire station.
That's the legend. So the fire chief basically pulled him aside one day and said, "Son, you're a nice guy, but you are going to get someone killed. Go back to Nashville and sing your songs."
So he essentially failed at being a normal person.
Exactly. And I think that's such a crucial insight into his psychology. He didn't choose music just because it was fun or glamorous. He chose it because he was fundamentally unemployable everywhere else. His brain just did not work in a normal 9-to-5 structured way.
Let's talk about that brain, because when he does go back to Nashville, he enters this really fertile, golden era of songwriting for other people.
He's not the star yet. He's the guy behind the scenes. He joins Ray Price's band, the Cherokee Cowboys, and he starts churning out massive hits.
Invitation to the Blues for Ray Price, Half a Mind for Ernest Tubb, and then the big one, Billy Bayou, for Jim Reeves.
Billy Bayou was his first #1 hit as a writer. Suddenly, he was the go-to guy in town if you needed a hit song.
But the stories about how he wrote these songs are just unbelievable. Buddy Killen, who ran the Powerful Tree Publishing Company, said he basically had to stalk Roger Miller.
Stalk him. Why?
Because Roger's mind never shut off. He would just see things in casual conversation. He'd be telling a joke or ranting about something, and a brilliant $1-million lyric would just fall out of his mouth.
That he wouldn't write it down.
He wouldn't even notice it. He'd just keep talking. So Buddy Killen literally had to follow him around town with a notepad, writing down the genius things that Roger was just throwing away in conversation.
It sounds like he had no filter between his brain and his mouth.
Zero. The country star Bill Anderson famously described him as the most talented and the least disciplined person he had ever met in his life.
And Miller had that great self-aware quote about his own brain.
Which one?
He said, "It starts working before you're even born and doesn't stop again until you sit down to write a song."
Meaning the moment he tries to work, the pressure makes it shut off.
Exactly. The magic had to be spontaneous. It had to feel like play. If it felt like work, he just couldn't do it. The well went dry.
So he's a successful songwriter. He's finally making good money. But he wants to be the star. He wants to be the one singing the songs.
Of course, every songwriter does.
And he tries. He gets a recording deal with Decca Records in 1958. And it flops.
Completely bombs. They didn't know how to market him.
So then he goes on tour as a drummer for Fair and Young just to make money. And the story is he'd never even played the drums before.
He was faking it, the ultimate hustler.
Then he gets that second chance with RCA, signed by Chet Atkins, the same guy who rejected him years before.
And he actually has a top 10 hit this time with a song he co-wrote with Bill Anderson, When Two Worlds Collide.
So this should be it. This should be his moment.
Yeah.
But then he completely blows it up. Why?
Because the wild child persona wasn't an act. It was real. He got bored with success. He was restless. He divorced his wife.
And he started hitting the pills.
The amphetamines, yeah. They became a huge part of his life in the early 60s. He became unreliable. He was showing up late for recording sessions or not showing up at all. And RCA, a very buttoned-down corporation, looked at the balance sheet and said, "This guy's not worth the trouble."
So they dropped him.
They dropped him.
So let's take stock. It's now 1964. He's been dropped by 2 major labels. He's divorced. He's broke again. He's got a reputation for being a flake. This feels like the end of the movie.
It absolutely should have been the end. He thought it was. He was seriously planning to give up music and move to Hollywood to try to become an actor because he figured his recording career was dead.
But he needed cash. Just gas money to get out of town.
Right. So he walks into the smaller label, Smash Records.
Smash wasn't a powerhouse like RCA, right?
No, Smash was a subsidiary of Mercury Records. They were scrappier, more willing to take a risk, and Miller makes them an offer that sounds completely insane today.
What was the deal?
He basically says, "Look, I'm in debt. Give me $1,600 in cash right now, and I will give you 16 completed sides."
Okay, explain sides for the younger listeners.
16 finished songs. An album and a half's worth of material. He was selling his art for $100 a song.
That is desperation pricing. That's a fire sale.
And Smash took the deal. They probably thought, hey, he's a great songwriter. Maybe we'll get 1 or 2 usable tracks out of this. They had no idea they were basically buying the winning Powerball ticket for $1,600.
So he goes into the recording booth. And this session is now the stuff of Nashville legend.
It really is. In one of his first sessions for Smash, he records, "Dang me.
Dang me, they ought to take a rope and hang me."
Yeah.
On the surface, it's just a silly, goofy song.
It sounds like a nursery rhyme for delinquents. But if you listen closer, everything about it is bizarre. First of all, he claimed he wrote it in 4 minutes in a hotel room in Phoenix.
4 minutes.
Just pure, uncut stream of consciousness, but musically. It's really weird. It's got this shuffling, jazzy rhythm. It is not traditional country music.
And his vocal performance.
It's unhinged. He's doing these vocal riffs, these nonsense scat syllables, high from a heavy limb. He's almost yodeling, but he's swinging it like a beatnik jazz singer.
It's that jazz influence finally coming on his own recordings.
It is. It's like beatnik coffeehouse culture crashing headfirst into the Grand Ole Opry. And for some reason, it just connected. It exploded.
It went to #1 on the country chart and #7 on the pop charts. On the Hot 100.
All of a sudden, the guy who's begging for gas money is one of the biggest recording stars in the entire country.
And then, from that same creative explosion, from those same sessions, comes the big one. The career-defining song, King of the Road.
And what's so interesting is to contrast the creation of Dang Me with King of the Road.
How so?
Dang Me took 4 minutes. It was a lightning strike. King of the Road, he labored over for months.
Why the difference? What made that one so hard?
Because King of the Road isn't a nonsense song. It's a masterpiece of lyrical economy. Every single word is perfect. Trailers for sale or rent, rooms to let, 50 cents. He's painting a complete, vivid picture with just a handful of words.
And he got the idea from seeing a sign, right?
Yeah, he saw a sign on the side of a barn outside Chicago that just said, trailers for sale or rent. And it stuck in his head, but he didn't know what to do with it for a long time.
And then the hobo.
Later, he was in an airport gift shop in Boise, Idaho, of all places, and he bought a little wooden statuette of a hobo, and he just stared at it. And he started thinking about the life of a drifter, a man with no attachments.
Which, in many ways, he basically was at that point in his life.
Exactly. He was writing his own autobiography, but he dressed it up as this romantic hobo character. No phone, no pool, no pets, I ain't got no cigarettes. It's the ultimate anthem of freedom.
And the sound of it. That cool, jazzy bass line and the finger snap.
The finger snap is iconic. When that record hit in 1965, it was an absolute phenomenon. It went gold almost instantly.
And that royalty check.
The royalty check he got that summer, just one check for that one song, was for $160,000.
Okay, let's do the inflation calculator on that in our heads.
Yeah.
$160,000 in 1965 is what, today?
It's well over $1.5 million in one check.
So he goes from, I need $1,600 or I'm quitting the business, to being a millionaire in the span of about 18 months.
What does that do to a person's psychology, especially a person who is already, by his own admission, unstable and undisciplined?
It validates the chaos. That's the danger, right? If you act crazy, if you break all the rules and the world responds by handing you $1 million and a pile of gold trophies, you learn that acting crazy works.
And the trophies definitely came. We have to talk about the Grammy Awards. Because I think people hear 11 Grammys and they assume, oh, that's over a long, distinguished career.
No, that's the incredible part. He won 11 Grammys in 2 years, 1964 and 1965.
That is statistically absurd. It's a level of dominance that's hard to even process.
He was winning everything. Best country song for Dang Me. Best contemporary vocal performance for King of the Road. Best new country and western artist.
He was beating the Beatles in some categories. He was beating Frank Sinatra. He was beating serious jazz artists. For 2 years, Roger Miller was the undisputed center of the American musical universe.
And he was just churning out hit after hit, Kansas City Star.
Which is such a clever, funny song about a guy who's a big fish in a small pond and is too scared to leave.
England Swings, Husbands and Wives.
And Husbands and Wives is the one that really proves he wasn't just a clown. It's a sad, beautiful mid-tempo waltz.
Two broken hearts, lonely, looking like houses where nobody lives.
That is a devastatingly good line. It shows he understood pain just as profoundly as he understood nonsense.
But then just as quickly, he would pivot back to something like, you can't roller skate in a buffalo herd.
Which he later said was his favorite song he ever wrote. And I love that about him.
What's the philosophy there?
I think the message is, life is dangerous and chaotic and unpredictable. It's a buffalo herd. But you can still be happy and find joy if you choose to. It's basically existentialism for cowboys.
So we're at the absolute peak. It's 1966, 1967. He's so famous he gets his own network TV show on NBC.
The Roger Miller Show. It didn't last long, but it was a huge deal at the time.
He even opens his own hotel in Nashville.
The King of the Road Inn.
And this place sounds like the setting of a Wes Anderson movie. It sounds completely surreal.
It was. It was the height of 70s chic, even though it opened in 1970. It had a rooftop lounge and a swimming pool shaped like a guitar.
And the penthouse suite where Miller stayed, it had a swinging double bed suspended from the ceiling.
A swinging bed.
It was the 70s, or close to it.
It became the unofficial clubhouse for the entire Nashville music scene. If you were anybody, Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, Dolly Parton, you were hanging out at the King of the Road Inn. Miller was holding court every night.
But this is also where the decline begins.
Yeah.
You can't maintain that pace.
You can't sprint a marathon. The hits started to dry up. The music industry changed around him.
The outlaw movement started happening.
Exactly. You have Waylon and Willie and Chris Christopherson coming in with a much grittier, more serious sound. And Miller was sort of caught in the middle. He was too pop for the Outlaws, but he was too weird and country for the new pop music. He just started to drift.
And the pills.
The pills were a constant. He talked about it later. He called it a snake pit I got into. He was using amphetamines to keep that manic creative energy firing, to keep the brain going 20/47, but eventually the crash always comes.
By the late 70s, he had basically just stopped writing songs. He felt like his best work was behind him, that he wasn't really appreciated for his artistry anymore.
He felt irrelevant.
But then, a fox and a bear save his career.
Disney comes calling.
It is such a weird, unexpected left turn in his story. How does the king of the road, the amphetamine-fueled wild child, end up as the voice of a rooster in Disney's Robin Hood?
Disney was making the film in 1973, and they needed a narrator. They wanted a kind of folksy, wandering minstrel vibe. And someone on the production team had the brilliant, out-of-the-box idea to cast Roger Miller as the voice of the rooster, Allan-a-Dale.
And he didn't just do the voice. He wrote and performed 3 original songs for the movie: Oodalally, Not in Nottingham, and Whistle Stop.
And Not in Nottingham is a surprisingly dark and melancholy song for a kids' movie. It's sung by the villagers who are in debtor's prison. It's about hopelessness and poverty.
He tapped right back into that Eric, Oklahoma Depression-era feeling.
Absolutely. But it was Whistle Stop, that little instrumental piece that had the weirdest afterlife of all.
The hamster dance?
Oh, the hamster dance.
I feel like I have to explain this for our Gen Z listeners who might have missed it. In the late 1990s, the internet was this new, lawless place. And one of the very first viral memes was a single web page with rows and rows of crudely animated dancing hamsters.
And the music playing on an endless, maddening loop was a sped-up version of Roger Miller's Whistle Stop from Robin Hood.
Millions, maybe billions of people heard that song and had absolutely no idea it was written by the same guy who wrote King of the Road.
You know, I think Miller would have absolutely loved that. It's pure, unadulterated absurdity. It fits his brand perfectly.
So the Disney movie keeps him visible. It introduces him to a new generation. But artistically, he's still pretty much dormant. It's the early 1980s. He hasn't had a real hit in over a decade. He's living the semi-retired life of country legend. And then he gets a phone call from New York City.
Broadway.
And we need to set the context here. In 1985, the worlds of country music and Broadway theater were not friends. They were on different planets.
To the New York theater elite, country music was seen as lowbrow. It was simple. It was hillbilly music. And to the Nashville crowd, Broadway was, fancy and pretentious.
For a country singer to be asked to write a full Broadway musical score, it was unheard of. It was seen as a joke.
But the producers of a news show called Big River, which was a musical adaptation of Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, they wanted authenticity. They didn't want a guy from Juilliard pretending to understand the Mississippi River Valley. They wanted the real thing.
So they reached out to Roger Miller. And here is the kicker, the most unbelievable part of this story.
Roger Miller had never read Huckleberry Finn.
He hadn't read the book, one of the great American novels.
Nope. But when the producers explained the story to him about a poor boy and a runaway slave floating down a river trying to find freedom, dealing with poverty and con men and the harsh realities of rural life, Miller said, "I don't need to read the book. I know that story. That's my childhood."
It resonated with the Eric, Oklahoma experience, the poverty, the feeling of being an outcast.
Deeply. But the writing process was absolute torture for him. Remember, this is a guy who wrote Dang Me in 4 minutes. Writing a complex, narratively driven musical score takes years of disciplined work.
How did he handle that kind of structure and discipline?
No, well, at first, the sources say it took him 1.5 years just to get the opening number right. He wanted to quit a dozen times. He felt like a fraud.
But he stuck with it.
He did. And this is where his genius really matured. He realized he couldn't just wait for a lightning bolt of inspiration to strike. He had to sit down and craft it note by note, line by line.
And the result?
Big River opened on Broadway in 1985, and the critics who were sharpening their knives ready to shred this country bumpkin were absolutely floored. They loved it. The score is sophisticated, it's literary, it's deeply emotional and funny and wise.
And the Tonys?
It won 7 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, and Roger Miller won the Tony Award for Best Original Score.
So he conquered the radio, he conquered television, and now he has conquered Broadway. It's the ultimate validation of his genius, from the last place you'd ever expect it.
It was. He even took over the role of Pap Finn, Huck's drunk and abusive father, in the show for 3 months. It was a massive, triumphant victory lap.
But the body keeps the score. All those years of hard living.
They do. Miller was a lifelong, unrepentant smoker. I mean, a chain smoker. There's a famous clip of him on a TV show where the host asks him, "What do you do with all the little bits and pieces of song ideas that you write down but don't use?"
And what did he say?
He taps his cigarette and says, with a straight face, "I smoke 'em."
He joked about everything, even his own vices. He wrote a song called "Dad Blame Anything a Man Can't Quit."
He did, but in 1991, he started having trouble with his voice. He was diagnosed with a malignant tumor. It was under his vocal cords.
The cruelest possible place for a singer and a songwriter.
He fought it for a while. He went through treatment. He did one last televised performance. It was a tribute to Minnie Pearl, the woman who gave him his first real job in Nashville all those years ago. The show aired the day after he died.
He passed away on October 25, 1992. He was only 56 years old.
Which is just tragically young when you think of all the music he still had in him.
But his legacy, I mean, it didn't just end there. His third wife, Mary Arnold, who had been a singer in Kenny Rogers' band, The First Edition, she fought for him even after he was gone.
That's a huge and important part of the story. She took over management of his estate. She famously sued Sony Music to get the copyrights to his songs back into the family's control, and she won a major victory.
She made sure that he wasn't just remembered as a footnote, but as the owner and author of his incredible body of work.
She's a huge reason his legacy is as strong as it is today.
So, we've laid out all the facts. We've seen the dirt poor kid, the manic hit songwriter, the washed-up star, and the unexpected Broadway legend. But I want to go back to that thought we started this whole deep dive with, the central paradox.
The wild child versus the genius.
We live in a world now that is completely obsessed with optimization. We want productivity hacks. We use AI to write our emails for us. We want everything to be efficient and clean and predictable.
And Roger Miller was the absolute opposite of efficient. He was messy, he was chaotic. He was, by Bill Anderson's own words, undisciplined.
And yet, he produced art that an algorithm could never, ever predict.
Absolutely not. If you fed a computer all the data on what made a hit country song in 1964, it would never in a million years spit out "do-wacka-do."
It would never think to rhyme purple with maple syrup, which Miller essentially did by just bending the language to his will.
He represents that purely human spark, the idea that maybe true creativity isn't an orderly process. Maybe it's actually a malfunction. It's your brain misfiring in a beautiful and unexpected way.
It goes back to his quote, "The human mind doesn't stop working until you sit down to write a song."
That's the lesson, isn't it? Maybe we need to stop trying to tame the chaos in our own creative lives. Maybe we need to stop trying to be so efficient and just let the mind run wild a little bit more.
You might end up in a snake pit. Sure, that's a real risk.
But you also might just end up with King of the Road.
And I think in the end, that is a risk worth taking.
Absolutely.
So next time you hear that cartoon rooster whistling, take a second to remember the guy behind the beak. The dirt poor 8th grade dropout genius from Oklahoma who smoked his bad ideas and turned the good ones into pure gold. Thanks for diving deep with us. See you next time.
Welcome to the debate. Today we are opening the ledger on a man who might be the single biggest paradox in the history of American music. If you only know the radio hits, you likely know him as the guy who sang about, trailers for sale or rent, or maybe as the voice of a rooster in Disney's Robin Hood. But if you look past the cartoons and the cigarette smoke, you find a man with 11 Grammys, a Tony Award-winning Broadway score, and a reputation among his peers as a genius who simply couldn't be contained. We are talking about Roger Miller. So the question we really need to answer today is this. Was Roger Miller a sophisticated, genre-bending musical savant who just happened to work in Nashville? Or was he primarily a wild child novelty act whose success relied on humor, total lack of discipline, and the specific constraints of the country machine?
Yeah, it's good to be here. And look, I'm not going to deny the hardware on his shelf. I mean, those Grammys are real and they are heavy. But I think we have to be very careful about this tendency to retroactively paint a portrait of some kind of high-minded auteur. When you actually look at the biography, and specifically at how these songs were made, you don't find a disciplined composer laboring over high art. You find a man defined by instability, by spontaneity, and by a reliance on what critics at the time dismissed as, nonsense syllables. So my argument is that Miller's brilliance, such as it was, came from his status as a wild child novelty star, not despite it.
See, I think that sells him incredibly short. To categorize Roger Miller simply as a country singer or a novelty act is to fundamentally ignore the complexity of the music itself. There's a reason the biography Ain't Got No Cigarettes explicitly describes him as an uncategorizable talent. We aren't just talking about a guy strumming 3 chords and telling a joke. All music points this out very clearly. Miller was blending country with jazz, blues, and pop in a way nobody else in Nashville was doing. He was utilizing unusual harmonic and rhythmic devices. I mean, using jazz chords in a honky-tonk, playing with tempo in ways that threw off the metronome. That isn't the work of a court jester. That is the work of a musical savant who was bored with the rules.
You say savant, I say someone who was flying by the seat of his pants. You mentioned his peers. Let's look at what they actually said. Bill Anderson, a giant in the industry, didn't call him a scholar. He called Miller the most talented and least disciplined person that you could imagine. That lack of discipline isn't a footnote. It's the headline. His breakthrough didn't come from a place of careful composition. It came from pure desperation. He needed cash. This is a man known as the singing bellhop at the Andrew Jackson Hotel. He got fired from the fire department in Amarillo for sleeping through a fire. His signature style, the scat singing, those vocalese riffs where he mimics instruments with his voice, those were gimmicks. They served honky-tonk novelty songs like Chug-a-Lug and Do-Waka-Do. They were fun, absolutely, but let's not pretend they were high art. They were parlor tricks that paid the rent.
I think you're mistaking the surface for the substance. My stance is that Miller was a transcendent artist. You're focusing on the novelty hits, but you're ignoring the sheer breadth of his career. This is a man who wrote the score for Big River in 1985. That show won 7 Tony Awards, including Best Score for Miller himself. You don't stumble into a Tony Award because you're undisciplined or lucky. Furthermore, look at his range. He could write Husbands and Wives, which is this sincere, mid-tempo waltz about the painful quiet of marital strife, and then turn around and write the children's music for Disney's Robin Hood. That demonstrates a sophisticated craftsmanship that completely defies the novelty label. He wasn't just throwing things at the wall. He was a master who could work in any medium.
And my position remains that while he was talented, his career was defined by that lack of discipline and a reliance on whimsical lyrics. The wild child persona wasn't an act. It was who he was. He admitted himself that he got into a snake pit with amphetamines. His creative process was chaotic. The fact that he had success on Broadway late in life doesn't erase the reality that his prime was built on being a clown prince. His charm lay in his inability to take things seriously, not in some secret, sophisticated plan.
Okay, but let's dig into that chaotic process because I think it actually proves my point. You view his speed and his erratic nature as a lack of seriousness. I argue that his process reveals a mind that was just a constant, high-speed creative engine.
I just don't buy that speed equals genius. Sometimes fast is just fast. Let's look at the story of how he signed with Smash Records. This moment is pivotal. He had been dropped from his previous label, he was broke, and he wanted to go to Hollywood to be an actor. So he goes to Smash Records and essentially begs for $1,600 in cash.
He needed the money to get to L.A.
Exactly. It was a transaction. He traded recording 16 sides for $1,600. That is not an artistic vision. That is a pawn shop deal. And what happened next? He wrote Dang Me in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. He sat down in a room and knocked it out faster than it takes to boil an egg. He recorded Chug-a-Lug in that same session. This suggests a volume over quality approach rooted entirely in immediate financial need. He was throwing debris at the tape machine, hoping something would stick so he could get his check.
And Dang Me went to #1.
If you can write a #1 hit in 4 minutes, that speaks to a preternatural gift and not laziness. I mean, Mozart wrote fast too, but you were cherry-picking the fast ones to suit your narrative. Let's talk about King of the Road. This is arguably his signature song. It topped the country and adult contemporary charts, hit #4 on the Billboard Hot 100, and was #1 in the UK. That song was not a 4-minute throwaway. It took him months to write.
Months? For a song that simple? It's basically a finger snap and a bass line.
Simple is hard. King of the Road was a result of meticulous observation. He saw a sign in Chicago that read, "Trailers for sale or rent." He didn't just write a song right then, he filed it away. Later, he encountered a hobo at an airport in Boise, Idaho. He watched this guy, studied him, he bought a statuette of a hobo at an airport shop and stared at it for inspiration. He let those ideas marinate, he worked on it until every syllable was perfect. No phone, no pool, no pets. That rhythmic cadence isn't accidental. And the result, it was certified gold, won numerous awards, and earned him a royalty check of $160,000 in one summer. That proves he possessed the patience for sophisticated songcraft when the material demanded it. He wasn't just a machine gun firing off nonsense, he was a sculptor who knew when to chip away slowly.
Okay, but have you considered how he treated his own ideas? You paint him as a sculptor, but he described his method as bits and pieces written on scraps of paper scattered everywhere. When he was asked in a television interview what he did with the unused ideas, he half-joked, "I smoke 'em," referencing his chain smoking habit. That doesn't sound like a man who reveres the craft. Even back at Tree Publishing, his boss Buddy Killen practically had to force him to finish pieces. Killen said people followed Miller around because everything he said was a potential song, and he was known to just give away lines to other people.
Because he had so many.
Or because he didn't value them. That is the behavior of a chaotic fountain of ideas, sure, but not a disciplined composer. He was leaking genius. He wasn't bottling it.
But Miller himself had a deep reverence for that fountain. He's quoted as saying, "The human mind is a wonderful thing. It starts working before you're even born and doesn't stop again until you sit down to write a song." That quote suggests a profound understanding of the subconscious nature of creativity. He understood that the work happens internally before it ever hits the page. Whether it took 4 minutes or 4 months, the processing power behind it was immense. He was trusting his gut in a way that, academic composers often can't.
I think we need to look at where this processing power came from, though. You can't separate the man from the environment. This brings us to the question of genre and identity. You want to paint him as this broad entertainment figure, but I would anchor him firmly in the country tradition. His roots are undeniable. He grew up dirt poor in Oklahoma, picking cotton and plowing. He was influenced by the Grand Ole Opry, Hank Williams, and Bob Wills. He isn't a jazz musician who got lost. He's a country boy who got bored.
Everyone in that generation had those influences, but Miller went beyond them. He stretched the fabric of what country music could be.
Did he? Really? Look at his early credentials. He didn't start on Broadway. He started as a fiddle player for Minnie Pearl. You don't get more establishment country than Minnie Pearl. He wrote Billy Bayou for Jim Reeves. He wrote Invitation to the Blues for Ray Price. These are the pillars of country music. Even when he had massive success, what did he do? In 1970, he didn't move to Paris. He opened the King of the Road Inn in Nashville. It had a rooftop lounge and a penthouse with a swinging double bed. It became the unofficial center of the Nashville music scene. He was a country mogul, a honky-tonk hero. Even AllMusic admits he was an influence on progressive country. But that still keeps him within the genre. He was the king of Nashville, not the king of pop.
The King of the Road Inn is a great example of his excess, sure. And yes, he started in Nashville. But the evidence shows he outgrew that scene. By 1978, Miller stopped writing songs. Why? Because he felt his more artistic works were not appreciated by that very Nashville crowd you say he belonged to. He felt stifled. He said, "I tried to do things like other artists, but it always came out different." He realized he was an outlier, and the ultimate proof of this is the Big River era.
Big River is the exception that proves the rule. It was a fluke at the end of a career.
It was not a fluke. It was the culmination of his genius. He wrote a Broadway score based on Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, And here is the kicker. He hadn't even read the novel when he accepted the offer.
Wait, doesn't that support my wild child argument? Accepting a job for a classic literary adaptation without reading the book? That sounds incredibly reckless. That sounds like the guy who slept through the fire.
Or it sounds like supreme confidence in his ability to translate emotion into music. He didn't need the book to understand the river. He grew up on one. He discovered the story brought him back to his own childhood in rural Oklahoma. He took a year and a half to write the opening number. That is not the behavior of a singing bellhop looking for a quick buck. And the industry recognized it. 7 Tony Awards. He even acted in the production, playing Pop Finn. And speaking of acting, he wasn't just doing cameos. He had a dramatic role in Quincy M.E., playing a singer who was burned while freebasing cocaine, a role that required genuine dramatic chops. He was the narrator in Nestor the Long-Eared Christmas Donkey. He was Allan-a-Dale in Robin Hood. These are not the footprints of a simple country singer. They are the marks of a multi-hyphenate entertainer who conquered every medium he touched.
I will grant you the theatrical success. It's impressive. But we cannot ignore the content of the music itself. This brings us to the lyrics. You talk about sophistication, but the legacy he left for most people is one of humor, nonsense, and novelty. We are talking about the man who wrote "You Can't Roller Skate in a Buffalo Herd." We are talking about "My uncle used to love me, but she died."
Those are classics, and they are brilliantly constructed.
They are comedies. They are jokes set to music. Even Kansas City Star is a humorous take on a local TV personality who is afraid to fail in a bigger market. And then you have the scat singing, that nonsense-sounding style filled with vocalese riffs, bum-bum-bum-boo-wah. To me, that suggests he wasn't taking the music seriously. He was playing with sound because he didn't want to engage with deep, serious lyricism in the way a Chris Christopherson or a Bob Dylan would. It was entertainment, pure and simple. He was the court jester making us laugh while the serious artists made us think.
You're assuming humor and depth are mutually exclusive. That is a massive mistake. The humor in Miller's work often masked a deeper, darker reality. You have to remember his background. His mother died of spinal meningitis when he was a year old. He was raised by his uncle. He was dirt poor. He didn't even have a telephone until 1951. That kind of trauma shapes a person. The humor was a survival mechanism, not a lack of seriousness. He was laughing to keep from screaming.
Trauma doesn't automatically make "Do-Waka-Do" a deep song. Sometimes a silly song is just a silly song.
Perhaps not on the surface, but look at Old Friends. That was a collaboration with Willie Nelson and Ray Price. It's incredibly poignant. Or look at Husbands and Wives. There is no scat singing there. It is a stripped-down, painful look at pride and separation. 2 broken hearts, lonely, looking like houses where nobody lives. That is a devastating lyric. And even the Disney songs take "Not in Nottingham" from Robin Hood. It is a song about imprisonment and poverty. It carries a distinct melancholic weight beneath the whimsy. The humor was a vehicle for complex expression. And regarding the amphetamine use, he called it a snake pit. That manic energy you dismiss as instability was actually the fuel for a very intense, sometimes dark artistic output. He was burning the candle at both ends to create that light.
It is true that the Wild Child moniker came from his party lifestyle and that amphetamine use. But I would argue that the drugs and the mania were responsible for the nonsense style. It's that frenetic energy that produces lines like "Engine, Engine Number 9. It's catchy, it's rhythmic, but is it profound?" I still maintain that his best work happened when he leaned into that chaotic honky-tonk spirit. When he tried to be too polished, he lost what made him Roger Miller. We loved him because he was a mess who could sing.
We are seeing the same evidence but interpreting the intention differently. You see the chaos as the defining feature. I see the chaos as the raw material that his genius refined into gold. He took the mess of his life and turned it into melody.
Well, as we wrap this up, the duality is undeniable. We are looking at a man who wrote "Do-Waka-Do" and the score for Big River.
Exactly. A range that very few artists in history can claim.
Look, for me, it really comes down to this. Roger Miller's brilliance was inextricably linked to his lack of discipline and his deep country roots. The bits and pieces on scraps of paper, the smoke 'em attitude, the songs written in 4 minutes, that was the essence of his genius. If you had tried to tame him, if you had tried to make him a serious composer from day one, we wouldn't have King of the Road. His charm lay in being the hobo poet, the guy who stole a guitar at 17 because he was desperate to write songs. He was the king of the road, not a polished Broadway star who happened to sing country.
And I will maintain that Roger Miller was a genius whose talent was simply too big for one genre to hold. While he certainly used country music and humor as his entry points, his rhythmic innovations and, let's not forget, Johnny Cash said Miller's vocal range was the closest to his own bass range he had ever heard, and his theatrical success proved he was a serious artist. He defied easy classification. He was an uncategorizable talent who could write a hit about a buffalo herd and then turn around and win 7 Tonys for adapting Mark Twain. He wasn't just a wild child, he was a wizard.
Whether wild child or wizard, he certainly left a mark.
Indeed, Roger Miller died far too young at the age of 56 from lung and throat cancer, but whether you view him as a novelty act or a musical genius, his impact on American music is undeniable. From the honky-tonks of Nashville to the stages of Broadway and the animated forests of Disney, he did it all. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening to the debate.
Thank you.
Welcome back to The Critique. Today, we're looking at a biographical profile of Roger Miller, the King of the Road, submitted by a listener. And they want to know if they've captured the essence of this really unique country music icon. So let's just get straight into it.
I'm ready. I've got the draft right here, and honestly, I've had "Do-Waka-Do" stuck in my head just from, reading the introduction.
It's catchy stuff. And that leads us right into the first major issue with this piece.
Okay.
The draft asserts repeatedly that Roger Miller was a genius. It actually uses that word, genius.
Yeah, I saw that. It lists his 11 Grammys, it lists the Tony Awards, it calls his lyrics whimsical. But here's the problem. Relying on a trophy case to prove artistic genius is a weak argument.
Okay, but can I play devil's advocate for a second?
Please. 11 Grammys is a lot of hardware. Doesn't that sort of objectively prove he was great? Why does the writer really need to do more work than that?
Because a list of awards tells me that he won, but it doesn't tell me why he won. It doesn't get me into the listener's ear at that time.
Gotcha.
So the weakness in this draft is that we are told he is uncategorizable, but we aren't shown the mechanics of that sound. The writer gives us the resume, but what we need are the engineering schematics.
So you're saying we need to get under the hood.
Exactly. My suggestion for the writer is to take the style section, which is currently just, a list of adjectives like funny and unique, and really expand it to deconstruct the specific sonic choices Miller made.
Okay, but how technical do we want to get here? I mean, this is a biography, not a music theory textbook. If the writer starts talking about, Mixolydian modes, they're going to lose the general audience.
You don't need music theory. You need vivid description.
Okay.
Look at the source material. There is a gold mine of a detail in there about his time with Faron Young. The text mentions that Miller toured as a drummer for Faron Young. But the kicker is, and the draft mentions this but just breezes past it, Miller didn't actually know how to play the drums.
Right, I saw that. He just faked it?
He faked it. Now, the current draft treats this as a funny fake-it-till-you-make-it anecdote about his job history. But stop and think about the musical implication of that.
Yeah.
If you have a guy on the drum kit who doesn't know the formal rules of drumming, what does the rhythm sound like?
Chaos? Or, I don't know, maybe inventive?
It's going to be loose. It's going to be unorthodox. He's probably hitting things a trained drummer wouldn't hit. The actionable advice here is to use that anecdote to explain his uncategorizable rhythm later in his career.
I see.
His style was born from necessary invention. He wasn't a technician. He was a guy trying to survive the song. That is a much more interesting narrative than just saying he was a drummer.
That's a great angle. It reframes incompetence as style. But what about the singing? The text mentions he was influenced by jazz, and it references all music calling him progressive country. But when I listen to Chug-a-Lug, I just hear a guy making funny noises. Is it really jazz?
That is exactly the question the writer needs to answer. You just hit the nail on the head. The current draft calls the lyrics whimsical.
Yeah.
That's a soft word. It implies he's just goofing around. But if you look at the scat singing, the shotgun, handgun, Volkswagen, bag of bones delivery, that is pure rhythmic improvisation.
So he's using his voice as a percussion instrument.
Precisely. He's doing what jazz vocalists do. So the suggestion here is to explicitly link those nonsense syllables to the jazz traditions that influenced him. Don't just say he was funny.
Right.
Say he was sneaking high-concept jazz phrasing onto country radio under the guise of novelty songs. That is where the genius lies, in the subversion.
I like that it elevates him from a clown to a subversive artist.
And we have to talk about King of the Road. The draft mentions it won a Grammy for Best Contemporary Rock and Roll Single.
Which is bizarre, right? It's a country song.
It is, but the draft misses the chance to explain why it crossed over. Think about the production of 1965 Nashville. The Nashville sound. What did that sound like?
Lush, orchestral, strings, background choirs, the Anita Kerr singers. It was a wall of sound.
And what does King of the Road sound like?
Finger snaps, a bass line. And that's about it.
Silence. It sounds like silence. The concrete example for the writer here is to describe that empty space.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just list the award. Describe the audacity of releasing a song with no drums and no orchestra in the middle of the most produced era of country music. The genius wasn't adding things. It was taking them away.
Okay.
If the writer paints that picture, the lonely sound of a finger snap against a bass line, the reader immediately understands the isolation of the hobo character in the song.
Okay, I'm sold. That transforms the style section from a list into an actual scene. But if we're talking about his chaotic style, we have to talk about his chaotic life.
Yeah.
And reading this draft, I feel like I'm reading about two different people.
You noticed that bifurcation too.
It's jarring. You have a section called Career, where everything is hits and awards. Then you have a section called Personal Life, where he's a wild child on amphetamines.
Yeah.
It's like the writer is afraid to let the two touch.
That is the second major weakness we need to address, the narrative disconnect. The source material explicitly states that the drugs and the wild child behavior were, quote, helpful to his songwriting.
Right.
You cannot sequester the volatility in a biographical sidebar if it is the fuel for the engine.
But isn't there a risk here? I mean, if we start saying the drugs helped him write, are we glorifying addiction, or are we just looking for a sensational angle?
We are looking for the truth of his process. We aren't judging it, we are documenting it. Look at the timeline. The draft mentions that Dang Me was written in 4 minutes in a hotel room in Phoenix.
4 minutes? That's absurd. It takes 4 minutes just to listen to the song twice.
And then on a separate page, the draft mentions he was deep into amphetamines in the 60s. The writer needs to put those two sentences next to each other. The suggestion is to weave the volatility into the timeline of the hits. The speed of that writing, that manic 4-minute burst, is a direct symptom of the chemical intervention.
So instead of a career chapter and a drugs chapter, you want a chronological descent.
I want a psychological profile. You can't understand the frantic energy of Doo if you don't understand the frantic energy of the man writing it. And speaking of frantic energy, we have to talk about the fireman story.
Oh my God. I read that 3 times. He was a fireman who slept through a fire?
He slept through a fire. And not just any fire. The draft says he saw the chicken coop burn and then went back to sleep.
And the fire department politely suggested he seek other employment? That is hilarious, but the draft just sort of drops it in as a fun fact about his resume.
Right.
Like, he was a soldier, a fireman, and a singer.
It is funny, but the writer needs to see the tragedy inside the comedy. This isn't just a quirky job switch. This is a man who was fundamentally incapable of functioning in a structured environment. He physically could not do a normal job.
So the stakes are higher.
Much higher. The suggestion for the rewrite is to use that anecdote to set up his return to Nashville. He didn't go back to music because he wanted to be a star. He went back because he was unqualified for literally anything else. He was desperate.
That actually aligns with the Smash Records story. The text says he asked the label for $1,600 in cash in exchange for recording 16 sides.
Right.
Now, in the current version, that reads like a business transaction. But look at the context the writer has buried elsewhere. He had just been dropped by RCA, he was divorced, he was known as a wild child, and he was broke. So that $1,600 wasn't a fee, it was a lifeline.
It was, I need to pay rent money. It was, I need to eat money. If the writer links the party lifestyle and the divorce directly to that moment, the scene changes. It becomes a high-stakes gamble.
Mm-hmm.
He walks into Smash Records desperate, asks for cash, and then he records Dang Me and Chug-a-Lug.
And Dang Me goes to #1. It's almost cinematic. He's backed into a corner, sleeping through fires, high on pills, and he pulls a rabbit out of the hat.
Exactly. And that tension drives the narrative. But then, the narrative changes. And this brings us to the third major critique, the Big River section.
The musical.
The musical. In the current draft, this section feels like a footnote. It reads like, and then in the 80s he wrote a play, won some Tonys, and passed away.
I get that. It feels like the epilogue, after the country hits. But to be fair, for a country fan, isn't the Broadway stuff less important?
Absolutely not. This is the climax of his entire life. Think about the arc we just discussed.
Okay.
The illiterate boy from a one-room schoolhouse in Eric, Oklahoma. The guy who couldn't hold a job. The guy who faked playing the drums. That guy goes to New York City and writes a score that wins 7 Tony Awards. That is the story.
It is a massive jump. But the draft does mention he wrote the score for Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
But did you catch the specific detail the source material offers? He accepted the job, but he had never read the book.
Wait, seriously? He wrote a musical based on Twain? Without reading Twain?
He hadn't read the novel. The writer has to make that the central hook of this section. How do you write a Broadway score for a literary masterpiece you haven't read?
Well, the source says he connected to it because of his childhood in rural Oklahoma.
Exactly. He didn't approach it intellectually, he approached it emotionally. He knew the dialect, he knew the dirt. The suggestion here is to frame Big River not as a departure from his country roots, but as the ultimate validation of them.
Okay.
He bypassed the New York elites because he was the real thing.
I see a really interesting contrast we could pull out here, too. We talked about Dang Me taking 4 minutes to write.
Yes.
The source notes say that for Big River, it took him a year and a half just to write the opening number.
That is the contrast. That is the character development. The writer needs to put those two facts side by side. The 4-minute manic burst of youth versus the 18-month disciplined grind of his later years.
It shows he finally tamed the wild child. He learned to sit still.
It proves that his talent wasn't just a drug-fueled accident. When he applied discipline, he created something enduring. If the writer focuses on that transition from spontaneous songwriter to disciplined composer, the biography gains a profound sense of closure.
That's powerful. It gives the reader a reason to care about the musical, even if they hate musicals. It's about the man, not the show.
Finally, let's look at how we anchor this whole story. The fourth critique is about validation. The material makes a strong case that Miller was famous, but it lacks external validation. We see names like Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, and Johnny Cash, but they feel like name drops.
You mean they are just listed as friends?
Right. He was friends with Johnny Cash. Okay, cool. But what did Johnny Cash think of him?
Is there a risk that we are relying too much on other people to define him? I mean, shouldn't his music stand on its own?
In a biography, peer respect establishes hierarchy. If I tell you Roger Miller was a great singer, that's my opinion. If Johnny Cash tells you Roger Miller was a great singer, that's a historical fact.
I see.
The source material has a quote from Cash where he discusses Miller's vocal range.
I saw that. Cash said Miller's bass range was the closest to his own that he had heard. That is a concrete tool for the writer. Currently, the draft doesn't really describe Miller's voice. Is it raspy? Is it high? Is it smooth? By using the Cash quote, you accomplish two things. You describe the instrument, it was deep, it was resonant, and you validate it through the voice of the god of country music. It also counters the novelty label again. If Johnny Cash suspects your voice, you aren't just a comedian.
Exactly. And look at the collaboration with Ray Price and Willie Nelson on Old Friends. The draft mentions it as his final hit, but the suggestion is to frame that collaboration to show that the serious Outlaws considered him a peer.
He wasn't the mascot. He was an equal.
He was an equal.
But there's one quote in the notes that I think tops them all. It's from Bill Anderson.
I know exactly which one you mean.
Anderson called him the most talented and least disciplined person you could imagine.
That is the golden ticket.
It's so brutal, but so accurate based on everything we've discussed.
My final and perhaps most important suggestion for the listener is to take that Bill Anderson quote and move it. Don't bury it in the middle. Put it at the very top.
Make it the thesis statement?
The most talented and least disciplined. If the writer opens the entire biography with that line, every single story that follows makes sense. The drumming for Fair and Young, talented but undisciplined. The amphetamines, talented but undisciplined. The sleeping through the fire.
Definitely undisciplined.
It gives the reader a lens through which to view the entire chaotic life. It turns a series of anecdotes into a coherent story about the tension between gift and curse.
It really ties it all together. It explains why he was the king of the road, but also why the road was so bumpy.
So let's recap the main actionable takeaways for our listener to transform this draft. First, deepen the musical analysis. Don't just list genres or awards.
Yeah.
Describe the silence in King of the Road. Connect the scat singing to jazz. Show us the mechanics.
Second, integrate the chaos. Stop protecting the reader from the drugs and the wild child antics. Use the 4-minute writing time of Dang Me and the fireman story to drive the narrative forward and explain his desperation.
Third, elevate Big River. It is the climax, not a footnote. Focus on the irony of an illiterate man writing a literary masterpiece and contrast the 18-month writing process with his earlier speed to show his growth.
And finally, let the legends speak. Use the quotes from Johnny Cash and Bill Anderson to validate his standing. Use that most talented, least disciplined line to frame the entire piece.
Roger Miller was a complex figure. He deserves a biography that is just as dynamic, unexpected, and rhythmic as he was. We invite you to take these suggestions, rewrite your draft, and please send it back to us.
Yeah.
We want to read the version that starts with Bill Anderson.
Absolutely. I want to read the story of the man who couldn't be tamed, not by genres, not by the army, and not by the music industry.
Good luck with the rewrite. Until next time.